The great meeting hall buzzed with nervous energy as hundreds of alien beings gathered for the most important council session in decades. The Galactic Council chamber was a massive dome made of crystal that sparkled like diamonds under the artificial suns. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in their designated areas, each species keeping to their own kind. Ambassador Zexthara stepped forward to the center platform. He was tall and covered in dark green scales that reflected the light. His yellow eyes swept across the crowd as he prepared to speak. The Dominion Empire had sent their best military commander to deliver this message, and everyone in the hall knew something big was about to happen. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," Zexthara began, his voice carrying clearly through the chambers. "Sound system. Today we address a problem that has gone unchecked for too long. The humans of Earth have grown too comfortable in their little corner of space." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many species had heard of humans, but few had much direct contact with them. Earth was far from the main trade routes, and humans kept mostly to themselves. "They mine asteroids in our territory," Zexthara continued, his voice growing louder. "They build colonies on worlds that should belong to more advanced species. They act as if they have the same rights as civilizations that have traveled the stars for thousands of years." In the human section, Commander Jake Morrison sat quietly. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair and steady blue eyes. His face showed no emotion, but inside he was carefully listening to every word. Next to him, Dr. Lisa Grant took notes on her tablet. She was younger than Jake, with short brown hair and glasses that made her look like the scientist she was. "The humans are primitive," Zexthara declared, spreading his arms wide. "Their ships are slow and clumsy. Their weapons are weak. Their technology is centuries behind even the youngest species in this council. They have one small world and a few tiny colonies. How can such a weak species claim equal standing with the great empires of the galaxy?" Several alien representatives nodded in agreement. The Dominion Empire was one of the most powerful forces in known space, controlling hundreds of worlds and countless star systems. Many smaller species looked to them for protection and leadership. From the far end of the hall, a very old voice spoke up. Elder Kithara was ancient even by the standards of her long-lived people. She appeared as a shimmering figure of light, almost transparent. Her race had been exploring space when most other species were still learning to make fire. "Young warrior," she said, her voice carrying the weight of countless centuries. "Perhaps you should listen to the old stories before making such bold claims." Zexthara turned toward her, his scaled face showing irritation. "What stories, Ancient One? Fairy tales and myths from before recorded history?" The records are real," Elder Kithara replied calmly. "My people have kept them for over 50,000 years. We have seen what happens when humanity is pushed too far. The Vaker Empire learned this lesson. So did the Crystal Dominion. So did the hegemony of worlds." "And where are these mighty empires now?" Zexthara asked with a laugh. "If they were so powerful, why have we never heard of them?" "Because they are gone," the elder said quietly. "All of them. Turned to dust and forgotten by history. All because they made the same mistake you are about to make." Captain Steve Parker, head of Human Military Intelligence, leaned forward in his seat. He was a soldier through and through, with the kind of alertness that came from years of dangerous missions. Next to him, Lieutenant Amy Chun watched the debate with growing concern. She was fresh out of the academy, but smart enough to understand the implications of what they were hearing. "You speak in riddles, old one," Zexthara said dismissively. "The Dominion has studied the humans extensively. We know their military strength down to the last ship. We have counted their weapons and measured their technology. They pose no threat to anyone with real power." "That is exactly what the others thought," Elder Kithara warned. "They saw the humans living peacefully on their little world. They watched them slowly expanding to nearby systems. They counted their ships and weapons. And they all made the same fatal error." "Which was?" Zexthara demanded. "They woke the sleeping giant." The chamber fell silent. Even species that had never heard these old stories could sense the gravity in the elder's voice. She had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on a shore, and her words carried the authority of someone who had witnessed history itself. Dr. Lisa Grant looked up from her notes, her face pale. She had spent years studying alien cultures and their histories. Some of the references the elder was making triggered memories of ancient texts she had read, stories that most scholars dismissed as mythology. The humans appear weak because they choose to be, Elder Cathara continued. They could have expanded aggressively like other species. They could have built massive fleets and conquered their neighbors. Instead, they focused on building, creating, learning. They developed technologies in directions that most species ignore. They learned to work together in ways that few can understand. Pretty words, Zexthara scoffed. But words do not win wars. Ships and guns win wars. And the Dominion has more of both than humanity could ever dream of. The Victor had 1,000,000 ships, the elder said sadly. The Crystal Dominion could shatter planets with their weapons. The hegemony controlled 1/4 of the galaxy. All of them thought the same thing you do now. Commander Morrison finally stood up. His movement was slow and deliberate, drawing attention from across the chamber. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. Ambassador Zexthara, he said formally, I appreciate your concerns about human expansion. Perhaps we can discuss a peaceful solution that works for everyone. The Dominion commander turned to face him, his yellow eyes gleaming with contempt. There is only one solution, human. Your species will submit to Dominion authority. You will abandon your colonies and return to your homeworld. Your ships will be surrendered to our fleet. Your military will be disbanded. And if we refuse, Morrison asked quietly, then you will be removed by force, Zexthara replied. We are prepared to blockade your world and destroy any ship that tries to leave. Your choice is simple, surrender or face extinction. The human delegation exchanged glances. They had come to this meeting hoping to discuss trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Instead, they were being threatened with total war by one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. Dr. Grant closed her tablet and stood beside Morrison. Her voice was steady despite the fear she felt inside. Ambassador, surely there must be some middle ground we can find. Humanity has never threatened the Dominion Empire. We have always been willing to negotiate. Negotiation implies equality, Zexthara said coldly. You are not our equals. You are barely more advanced than the primitive species we protect in our outer territories. The time for negotiation is over. Elder Cathara watched this exchange with growing sadness. She had seen it all before, played out with different actors, but always the same tragic ending. The pattern was always identical. A powerful empire would notice humanity's quiet expansion, dismiss them as weak and primitive, and then make demands that no proud species could accept. You have 24 standard hours to respond, Zexthara announced to the chamber. After that, the Dominion fleet will begin operations to bring the human territories under proper control. As the council session ended and beings began filing out of the chamber, Elder Cathara approached the human delegation. Her form flickered like starlight as she moved, and her voice carried genuine regret. Commander Morrison, she said softly, I am truly sorry. We tried to warn them, but they would not listen. They never do, Morrison nodded grimly. His years of military experience had taught him to recognize when diplomacy had failed. Thank you for trying, Elder, but I think it's the Dominion who should be sorry. They have no idea what they've just started. As the humans prepared to leave the council chamber, Captain Parker activated his communication device to send an encrypted message back to Earth. The message was simple but carried enormous weight. Diplomatic solution failed. Prepare for war. Lieutenant Chun looked around the emptying chamber one last time. Sir, do you really think we can stand against the entire Dominion Empire? Morrison was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Elder Cathara's warnings and the ancient empires that had underestimated humanity before. Finally, he smiled grimly. Amy, they're about to learn why the universe warned them never to provoke humanity. They didn't listen then, and they're not listening now. That's going to be their biggest mistake. Admiral Kate Wilson stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance watching the stars through the main viewing screen. The ship was humanity's newest and most advanced warship, but even she knew it looked primitive compared to the sleek vessels of the major galactic powers. What the aliens didn't know was that human ships were built for different purposes than theirs. "Admiral, we're receiving emergency transmissions from across the colonies," reported Commander Alex Turner from his station. His face was grim as he read the incoming messages. "The Dominion has begun their attacks. They hit New Boston Colony first, then moved to the mining stations at Alpha Centauri." Kate felt her stomach tighten. She had known this moment would come. Ever since the failed council meeting, but hoping for peace and preparing for war were two very different things. "What's the damage report?" "New Boston is gone, ma'am," Alex said quietly. 2 million people. We lost contact 6 hours ago." The automated distress beacon went silent an hour later. Dr. Lisa Grant, who had been working frantically since returning from the council meeting, looked up from her computer terminal. She had been promoted to Chief Strategic Advisor after her analysis of alien technology proved invaluable. "Admiral, the attack patterns match exactly what we expected. The Dominion is using their standard invasion protocols." "Which means they hit military targets first, then civilian populations to break our will to fight," Kate said. She had studied every major Dominion campaign for the past 20 years. Their tactics were effective but brutal. "That's their first mistake," Commander Turner said, his hands clenched into fists. "They don't understand humans at all." Kate nodded grimly. Other species might surrender when faced with overwhelming force, but humans had a different reaction to being cornered. History was full of examples: small human forces that fought impossible odds, civilians who refused to surrender even when facing certain death, entire populations that chose resistance over submission. On Earth, the emergency session of the Global Defense Council was already underway. President William Hayes sat at the head of a table surrounded by the planet's top military leaders. General Patricia Lopez commanded the Space Marines, while Admiral Richard Stone controlled the home fleet. Both had been preparing for this day since the Dominion's ultimatum. "Ladies and gentlemen," President Hayes began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "For the first time in human history, we face a threat that could end our species. The Dominion Empire has 3,000 ships, controls hundreds of worlds, and has never lost a major war." "Mr. President," General Lopez interrupted, "permission to speak freely?" Hayes nodded. "They may have never lost a war, but they've never fought humans before," she said firmly. "Every war game we've run, every simulation we've completed shows the same thing. Their tactics work against species that think like them. We don't." Admiral Stone activated a holographic display showing the current disposition of human forces. "Sir, we have 400 ships ready for combat, with another 200 in various stages of construction. Our ground forces number 50 million trained soldiers, with civilian militias adding another 100 million. Numbers that would be impressive against other human nations," Dr. Grant interjected via video link from the Vengeance. "But against the Dominion, we're outnumbered almost 10 to 1 in ships, and probably 1,000 to 1 in total military personnel." President Hayes studied the display, his face thoughtful. "Dr. Grant, what's the status on the special projects?" "Project Prometheus is ready for testing, sir. If our theories are correct, we may have found something that levels the playing field." In the deep laboratories beneath Luna Base, Dr. Marcus Chun worked alongside his sister Lisa's research team. As head of advanced weapons research, he had been given unlimited resources and told to think outside the box. What his team had discovered could change everything. "The breakthrough came when we studied captured Dominion communication equipment," he explained to Dr. Susan Blake, the project's lead physicist. "Their entire military operates through telepathic links. Every ship, every soldier, every commander is connected through what they call the Unity Network." Susan nodded as she made adjustments to their experimental device. "Which means they can coordinate perfectly, but it also creates a massive vulnerability. If we can disrupt that network, we turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness, Marcus finished. A weapon that specifically targets non-human neural patterns while leaving human brains completely unaffected. Meanwhile, Captain Steve Parker was leading a small reconnaissance team deep behind enemy lines. His mission was critical: gather intelligence on Dominion tactics and capabilities. With him were Sergeant Mike Torres, an explosives expert, and Lieutenant Kelly Swift, their communications specialist. They had infiltrated the occupied colony world of Haven using a stealth ship that was barely more than a modified cargo hauler. What they found there made their blood run cold. "My God," Kelly whispered as they observed the Dominion facility from their hidden position in the hills above the main settlement. "What are they doing to the prisoners?" Through their binoculars, they could see long lines of human colonists being processed through strange machines. Some went in and never came out. Others emerged changed, their eyes vacant and movements mechanical. "They're not just conquering territory," Steve said grimly as he recorded everything they saw. "They're converting humans into some kind of biological computers. The survivors are being turned into living tools." Mike Torres studied the facility's defenses through his scope. "Captain, we need to get this information back to command. If the Dominion is doing this on every world they capture, then this isn't a war of conquest," Steve finished. "It's a war of extermination and enslavement." The intelligence they gathered painted a horrific picture. The Dominion didn't see humans as a species to be defeated and then governed. They saw them as resources to be harvested. Human brains, it turned out, were particularly good at certain types of calculations that Dominion computers struggled with back on Earth. The implications of Steve's report sent shockwaves through the military leadership. President Hayes called an emergency meeting that included not just military commanders but also civilian leaders, scientists, and philosophers. "This changes everything," General Lopez said after reviewing the footage. "We're not just fighting for our freedom. We're fighting for our very existence as a species." "More than that," added Dr. Grant, who had returned to Earth for the meeting. "We're fighting to prevent every human who has ever lived from having their lives, meaning reduced to being spare parts for alien machines." Admiral Stone stood and walked to the large window overlooking the capital city. Millions of people went about their daily lives below, unaware that their entire species stood on the brink of extinction. "In that case," he said quietly, "we need to authorize everything. Every experimental weapon, every theoretical technology, every contingency plan we've ever considered." President Hayes nodded slowly. "Project Prometheus is now our highest priority. Dr. Chun, you have unlimited resources and authority." "General Lopez, begin full mobilization of all reserve forces. I want every human capable of holding a weapon trained and equipped within the next month." "Sir," Dr. Grant said carefully, "there's something else. Our analysis of Dominion technology shows they're using principles we abandoned decades ago because we thought they were too dangerous." "What kind of principles?" the president asked. "Biological integration with technology. Direct neural interfaces with computers. Genetic modification of soldiers. Things we decided were too risky or too inhumane to pursue." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had always prided itself on maintaining ethical standards even in warfare. But facing extinction changed the equation entirely. "Dr. Grant," President Hayes said finally, "I want you to review every abandoned project, every shelved technology, every theoretical weapon we've ever considered too dangerous to build. If it can help us survive this war, we're going to build it." Across human space, a transformation was beginning. Factory worlds that had produced civilian goods for centuries retooled overnight for military production. Research stations that had been studying peaceful applications of technology shifted to weapons development. Colony worlds that had never seen a soldier outside of parades began training civilian militias. The Dominion had expected humanity to collapse within days of the first attacks. Their experience with other species suggested that losing a few major Colonies would trigger mass surrenders and political chaos. Instead, something unprecedented was happening. Every attack made humanity more unified, not less. Every atrocity strengthened their resolve instead of breaking it. Every loss made the survivors fight harder rather than surrender. Admiral Wilson watched the reports flooding in from across human territory. Ship construction was accelerating beyond all projections. Recruitment centers were overwhelmed with volunteers. Scientific breakthroughs were happening at an impossible pace. "Commander Turner," she said, studying the tactical displays, "prepare the fleet for our first major engagement. It's time to show the Dominion what happens when you threaten the human species." The sleeping giant was waking up, and the galaxy was about to discover why the ancient warnings existed. 6 months had passed since the Dominion's first attack, and space around the Centauri system filled with ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Kate Wilson stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching as 200 human vessels took formation around her flagship. These were not the same primitive ships the Dominion had expected to face. The human fleet looked strange compared to the sleek alien designs most species preferred. Human ships were angular and rough, built like hammers rather than swords. But what they lacked in elegance they made up for in raw capability. Every vessel had been rebuilt from the ground up using technology that hadn't existed a year ago. "Admiral, all ships report ready for combat," Commander Alex Turner announced from his station. He had been promoted to captain of his own vessel, the UES Justice, but remained on the Vengeance for this crucial battle. "The Prometheus weapons are online across the entire fleet." Dr. Lisa Grant's voice came through the communication system from the science lab deep within the ship. "Admiral, I'm reading massive energy signatures approaching from hyperspace. The Dominion fleet is about to arrive." Kate nodded grimly. Intelligence reports suggested they would face over 500 enemy ships, commanded by the same Zexthara who had threatened humanity at the Galactic Council. This would be the first real test of everything humanity had built in response to the alien threat. "All ships, prepare for enemy contact," she broadcast to the fleet. "Remember, they expect us to fight like every other species they've conquered. They're about to learn that humans don't follow anyone else's rules." The space around Centauri suddenly filled with light as hundreds of Dominion vessels emerged from hyperspace. Their ships were beautiful in the way that advanced alien technology always was, smooth curves of metal that seemed to flow like water. Each vessel was larger than its human counterpart, and their weapons had been proven in dozens of galactic conflicts. Commander Zexthara stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's pride, studying the human formation through his tactical displays. 6 months ago, he had expected this war to be over in days. Instead, the humans had proven surprisingly stubborn, forcing him to commit more and more resources to what should have been a simple conquest. "Tactical assessment," he ordered his second in command, a mantis-like creature called Clicktar. "The human fleet numbers approximately 200 vessels." Clicktar reported, his insect eyes studying the readings. "They appear to be using the same basic technology as before, but our sensors are detecting some unusual energy signatures. Probably desperate modifications to their weapons," Zexthara said dismissively. "Humans always try to compensate for their technological inferiority through crude brute force approaches." What the Dominion commander didn't understand was that human technology had evolved in directions no other species had ever considered. While most galactic civilizations focused on building bigger ships and more powerful individual weapons, humans had taken a completely different approach. On the UES Justice, Captain Alex Turner watched the enemy fleet deploy into their standard attack formation. The Dominion always used the same tactics because they had worked against every species they had ever fought. Overwhelming firepower concentrated on the strongest enemy ships, followed by systematic destruction of smaller vessels. "Captain," his tactical officer reported, "the enemy is beginning their approach. They're targeting our largest ships first, just like the simulations predicted." "Perfect," Alex smiled grimly. "All weapons ready. Begin evasive maneuvers on my mark." The battle began exactly as every Dominion engagement had for the past 1,000 years. Their massive ships opened fire with weapons that could crack planets, sending streams of energy toward the largest human vessels. But something unexpected happened. The human ships didn't try to absorb the damage like other species did. Instead, they moved in ways that seemed impossible, dodging attacks that should have been unavoidable. More shocking still, when the alien weapons did hit human ships, the damage was far less than it should have been. "How are they doing that?" Zexthara demanded as he watched his fleet's opening barrage achieve almost nothing. "Our weapons should have destroyed at least 20 of their ships by now." "Commander," Kliktar said, his voice uncertain for the first time in decades of service, "their armor appears to be adapting to our weapon frequencies. Each hit makes them more resistant to that specific type of attack." On the Vengeance, Dr. Grant monitored the battle from her science station. "Admiral, the adaptive armor is working perfectly. Every time they hit us with energy weapons, our hull plating learns to deflect that exact frequency." "And the Prometheus system?" Admiral Wilson asked. "Ready to activate on your command. All enemy ships are within range." Kate watched as the Dominion fleet pressed their attack, moving closer to try to overcome the human defenses through sheer volume of fire. They were following their standard tactics perfectly, which meant they were walking directly into humanity's trap. "All ships, activate Prometheus Protocol," she ordered, across the human fleet. Weapons that existed nowhere else in the galaxy came online. The neural resonance field generators that Dr. Marcus Chun had developed specifically to target alien brain patterns sent invisible waves of energy toward the Dominion ships. The effect was immediate and devastating. Aboard the enemy vessels, crew members who had been linked together through their telepathic network suddenly found themselves unable to communicate. Worse, the fields were designed to cause confusion and panic in non-human minds. Commander Zexthara felt the first effects as a sharp pain in his head, followed by a growing sense of disorientation. Around him, his bridge crew began acting strangely. Some stared blankly at their controls, others started giving contradictory orders. "What's happening?" He shouted, but his tactical officer Kliktar could only make clicking sounds, his insect mind overwhelmed by the neural interference. "Sir," his communications officer managed to say, "we're losing contact with the fleet. Ships are reporting massive coordination failures." The beautiful synchronization that made Dominion fleets so effective began to collapse. Ships that had moved together like dancers suddenly started bumping into each other. Some vessels opened fire on their own allies, their crews unable to tell friend from enemy through the neural chaos. Captain Steve Parker, now commanding a fast attack group, led his ships into the confused enemy formation. His vessels had been equipped with Dr. Susan Blake's newest innovation, weapons that could phase through conventional shields and strike directly at ship hulls. "All ships, target the command vessels," he ordered. "Take out their ability to coordinate, and this battle is over." The human attack was unlike anything the Dominion had ever experienced. Instead of trying to match alien firepower with bigger guns, humans used precision strikes against specific targets. Their weapons bypassed shields entirely, striking critical systems with surgical accuracy. General Patricia Lopez led the ground assault portion of the battle, her Space Marines equipped with powered armor that made them nearly unstoppable. When Dominion forces tried to board human ships, they found themselves facing soldiers who seemed to anticipate every move. "Remember your training," she broadcast to her forces as they prepared to board enemy vessels. "These aliens showed no mercy to our civilians. We show them what human justice looks like." The Space Marines who boarded Dominion ships were different from any soldiers the aliens had ever fought. They didn't just fight to win. They fought with the fury of a species that had seen its children turned into living computers. Every human soldier carried images of what they had found on occupied worlds, and that knowledge made them absolutely relentless. Major Kelly Swift coordinated the liberation of any human prisoners they found aboard enemy ships. Her teams had trained specifically for these rescue operations, using non-lethal weapons to free captured colonists while systematically destroying the alien conversion equipment. "We've secured another group of survivors," she reported as her team cleared another section of a Dominion vessel. 73 humans, all alive but showing signs of neural modification attempts. The tide of battle turned completely within the first hour. The Dominion fleet, which had arrived expecting an easy victory, found itself fighting an enemy that seemed to know exactly what they were going to do before they did it. Human ships coordinated perfectly while alien vessels struggled with basic communication. Zexthara watched in growing horror as his mighty fleet was torn apart by forces he didn't understand. Ship after ship fell to human weapons that should have been primitive and ineffective. His crews, trained to perfection in conventional warfare, seemed helpless against human tactics. "Impossible," he muttered as another of his command ships exploded under precise human fire. "They were barely space-capable a year ago. How can they be doing this?" The answer lay in something the Dominion had never understood about humanity. While other species developed technology to make war easier, humans developed technology to make themselves better at war. Their ships were linked through quantum communication networks that couldn't be jammed. Their weapons adapted in real time to overcome enemy defenses. Their soldiers fought with a coordination that went beyond mere training. The space around Earth had never seen anything like it. 3,000 Dominion warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, blocking out the stars with their massive hulls. At the center of this unprecedented armada was the Dominion's Wrath, a dreadnought so large it could house entire cities within its metal frame. Supreme Commander Velanash stood on the bridge of his flagship, his forearms crossed as he studied the tactical displays. He was the Dominion's greatest military leader, a being who had conquered more worlds than any other in their history. The defeat at Centauri had shocked the entire Empire, but it had also taught them valuable lessons about human capabilities. "Humans of Earth," he broadcast across all frequencies, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. "Your tricks at Centauri were impressive, but you face the full might of the Dominion Empire now. We have brought every ship, every weapon, every soldier we possess. Surrender immediately, and we will grant you the mercy of quick death." On Earth, President William Hayes stood in the underground command center that had become the heart of human resistance. Around him, holographic displays showed the enemy fleet in all its terrifying glory. The numbers were almost impossible to comprehend. 3,000 ships against humanity's entire remaining fleet of 400 vessels. "Status report," he asked quietly, his voice steady despite the overwhelming odds they faced. Admiral Kate Wilson appeared via hologram from the UES Vengeance, now leading humanity's main battle fleet positioned between Earth and the approaching enemy. "Mr. President, our scouts confirm the intelligence. They've brought everything. Ships we've never seen before, weapons that dwarf anything they used." At Centauri, General Patricia Lopez stood beside the president, her face grim but determined. "Sir, our ground defenses are ready. Every major city has been evacuated to the underground shelters. If they break through the fleet... they won't," President Hayes said firmly. "Dr. Grunt, what's the status on our final preparations?" Dr. Lisa Grunt, who had spent months developing humanity's ultimate response to this moment, activated the main tactical display. "The quantum entanglement network is fully operational, Mr. President. Every human ship, station, and defensive platform is now linked through instantaneous communication. We'll have coordination they can't match or disrupt." The technology she described was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. While other species relied on traditional communications that could be jammed or delayed, humans had created a network that operated outside normal space-time. Every human commander would know exactly what every other commander was thinking and planning in real time. Dr. Marcus Chion joined the briefing from Luna Base, where he had been working on humanity's most desperate gambit. "The neural resonance amplifiers are in position around the solar system. If we can get their fleet close enough to Earth, we can hit them with a field strong enough to affect their entire command structure simultaneously." Admiral Steve Parker commanding the Outer Defense Fleet, reported from his position near the asteroid belt. "Mr. President, we've completed the modifications to our weapons systems. Every ship in the fleet can now target enemy vessels through their shields using Dr. Blake's phase technology." Dr. Susan Blake herself was aboard the research vessel UES Discovery, monitoring readings from the approaching enemy fleet. The Dominion has adapted their shields to counter our previous weapons, but they're still using the same basic technology. Our new phase disruptors should be able to penetrate their defenses. Supreme Commander Velanash studied the human defensive positions with growing confidence. The defenders had arranged themselves in traditional formations, spreading their smaller fleet across multiple defensive lines. It was exactly what Dominion strategists had predicted humans would do when facing overwhelming odds. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "All ships maintain formation. Destroy their outer defenses first, then advance on their home world. Show them the price of defying the Dominion Empire." The battle began with a display of firepower that dwarfed every previous engagement in galactic history. 3,000 Dominion ships opened fire simultaneously, sending enough energy toward the human fleet to sterilize entire planets. The space between Earth and the enemy armada lit up like a new sun, but something unprecedented happened. The human ships didn't try to absorb or deflect the massive barrage. Instead, they simply weren't there when the weapons arrived. "Impossible," Velanash muttered as his tactical displays showed empty space where hundreds of human vessels should have been destroyed. "Where did they go?" The answer came from his sensor officer, a crystalline being whose multiple eyes could process visual data faster than most computers. "Commander, they appear to have moved in perfect synchronization. All 400 ships displaced simultaneously to new positions." What the Dominion didn't understand was that human ships were no longer operating as individual vessels. The quantum entanglement network had linked every human commander into a single tactical consciousness. They moved together like fingers on a hand, each ship knowing exactly where every other ship would be at any given moment. Admiral Wilson watched from the Vengeance as the human fleet executed maneuvers that would have been impossible for any other species. "All ships execute Pattern Alpha. Show them what coordination really looks like." The human counterattack was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. 400 ships moved in perfect harmony, their weapons firing with mathematical precision. Every shot was calculated to hit exactly where enemy vessels would be, taking into account their speed, acceleration, and defensive patterns. Captain Alex Turner, commanding the UES Justice, led his squadron through the enemy formation like a knife through water. His ships phased through Dominion shields as if they didn't exist, striking critical systems with surgical accuracy. "Target their command ships," he ordered his pilots. "Take out their ability to coordinate, and this becomes 400 separate battles instead of one big one." The Dominion fleet, despite its massive size, had a critical weakness that humans had identified and exploited. Their entire command structure depended on a small number of super dreadnoughts that coordinated all other vessels through telepathic networks. If those command ships were destroyed, thousands of smaller vessels would be left without direction. Major Kelly Swift, now commanding an entire division of Special Operations Forces, led boarding parties against the largest enemy vessels. Her troops had been equipped with armor that made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons, and training that turned them into perfect killing machines. "Remember what they did to our colonies?" she broadcasted to her forces as they prepared to assault the enemy flagship. "No mercy, no prisoners. Show them what happens when you threaten human children." The Space Marines who boarded Dominion ships were different from any soldiers the aliens had ever faced. They fought with a cold fury that came from seeing their own species tortured and converted into living tools. Every human warrior carried the weight of 2 billion dead colonists, and that knowledge made them absolutely unstoppable. Supreme Commander Velanash felt his confidence cracking as his massive fleet began to tear itself apart. Ships that should have been coordinating perfectly were colliding with each other. Weapons meant for human targets were striking Dominion vessels. The beautiful synchronization of his armada was dissolving into chaos. "What's happening to our ships?" he demanded of his tactical staff. "Commander," his communications officer reported with growing panic, "we're detecting some kind of neural interference field. Our telepathic networks are being disrupted. Crews are reporting confusion, disorientation, and in some cases, complete loss of higher brain functions." The neural resonance amplifiers that Dr. Chun had positioned around the solar system were doing exactly what they had been designed to do. The closer Dominion ships came to Earth, the stronger the field became. Alien crews found themselves unable to think clearly, unable to communicate with each other, unable to follow even simple orders. General Lopez coordinated the ground-based portion of the battle, directing massive railgun installations that could punch through the heaviest enemy armor. "All planetary defense stations, target the largest enemy vessels. Don't let anything get close enough to threaten the civilian shelters." The tide of battle turned completely within the first 2 hours. The Dominion fleet, which had arrived expecting to crush human resistance through sheer numbers, found itself fighting an enemy that seemed to anticipate every move, counter every strategy, and turn every advantage against them. Dr. Grant monitored the battle from her command post, watching as human technology proved superior to alien science in every meaningful way. "Mr. President, the enemy fleet is in full retreat. Their command structure has completely collapsed." President Hayes watched the tactical displays as 3,000 enemy ships tried desperately to escape the solar system. Most would never make it. Human pursuit vessels, faster and more maneuverable than anything the Dominion possessed, hunted down fleeing enemies with ruthless efficiency. "Admiral Wilson," he said quietly, "any word from Supreme Commander Velanash?" "He's requesting terms for surrender, sir," Kate replied from the bridge of the Vengeance. "His flagship is crippled and drifting." 3 days after the battle that historians would call the Great Reckoning, Supreme Commander Velanash knelt on the deck of the UES Vengeance. His forearms were bound behind his back, and his once proud uniform was torn and stained. Around him stood the leaders of humanity, the species he had come to destroy, but which had instead destroyed everything he had ever known. Admiral Kate Wilson looked down at the broken alien commander, feeling no satisfaction in his defeat. Too many humans had died in the colonies before this moment. Too many families had been torn apart by Dominion cruelty. Justice demanded more than just military victory. "Supreme Commander Velanash," she said formally, on behalf of the Terran Federation and all human colonies, I accept your surrender. The Dominion Empire as it existed is finished." Velanash raised his head to look at her, his alien features showing the weight of absolute defeat. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "Our intelligence said you were primitive. Our sensors showed your technology was centuries behind ours. How did we lose so completely?" President William Hayes stepped forward, his face grave but not unkind. "Commander, your empire made the same mistake that every bully makes. You confused kindness for weakness, peace for inability to fight. You saw that we chose not to conquer other species and assumed we couldn't." Dr. Lisa Grant, now serving as humanity's chief negotiator, activated a holographic display showing the terms of surrender. "The Dominion Empire will be completely dissolved. Your military will be disbanded under human supervision. Every species you conquered will be given the choice of independence or protection under human authority." "You're giving them a choice?" Velanash asked, genuinely confused. "They are your spoils of war. Why not simply add them to your own empire?" General Patricia Lopez answered that question with the cold authority of someone who had seen too much. "Alien cruelty. Because we're not you, Commander. We don't build empires by enslaving others. We protect those who can't protect themselves." The terms that humanity presented to the defeated Dominion were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Rather than demanding tribute or territory, humans focused on preventing future atrocities and helping the victims of Dominion rule. Admiral Steve Parker outlined the military conditions. "Your remaining fleets will be escorted to designated systems, where they will be decommissioned. Any attempt to rebuild your war machine will result in swift and permanent action. We've proven we can find you anywhere, defeat you anywhere. Dr. Marcus Chun presented the technological requirements. All research into biological conversion of sentient beings will be turned over to human scientists for destruction. Any Dominion citizen found to possess such technology will face trial for crimes against all sentient life. But it was Elder Cathara who spoke the words that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The ancient being had traveled to Earth specifically to witness this moment, her ethereal form flickering with inner light. "Let this be recorded in the histories of every species," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 50,000 years of galactic history. Humanity is not a species to be threatened lightly. They do not seek conquest, but they will not tolerate genocide. They are patient until provoked, merciful until betrayed, peaceful until their families are threatened. She turned to address not just those present, but all the species listening to the broadcast across the galaxy. But once awakened, they become something beyond our understanding. They fight not just to win, but to protect. They do not simply defeat their enemies. They ensure those enemies can never threaten innocence again. Dr. Susan Blake watched from the science station as data flowed in from across human space. The war had transformed humanity from a single-world species into the dominant military power in their region of the galaxy. More importantly, it had revealed capabilities that even humans themselves hadn't fully understood. The quantum coordination networks, the adaptive weapon systems, the neural resonance technology. She said to her colleague Dr. Chun, "It's like the threat of extinction forced us to evolve in ways we never thought possible." Or maybe, Marcus replied thoughtfully, it just forced us to become what we always had the potential to be. Major Kelly Swift, now promoted to general, was already implementing humanity's post-war plans. Her new humanitarian corps was dedicated to helping refugee species and preventing future genocides. Many of her officers were former enemies who had seen what humanity was capable of and chosen to serve rather than face destruction. "General," one of her aides reported, "we've completed the liberation of the Zephyrian colonies. The former Dominion slave worlds are requesting human protection while they rebuild their governments." "Approved," Kelly said without hesitation. "And make sure they understand this isn't temporary occupation. When they're ready to govern themselves, we leave. Our job is to protect, not to rule." Across the galaxy, species that had never heard of humans before the war now spoke their name with a mixture of respect and caution. Trade delegations lined up to request audiences with human representatives. Former enemies begged for protection. Under human authority, the balance of power had shifted so dramatically that the old order was completely shattered. Captain Alex Turner, now an admiral commanding an entire fleet, was tasked with maintaining peace in the former Dominion territories. His ships patrolled trade routes that had been plagued by pirates for centuries, ensuring that commerce could flow freely between worlds. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a distress call from the Altarian system. Pirates are attacking civilian transports." "All ships, set course for Altair," Alex ordered. "Maximum speed. Show them what happens to anyone who preys on innocent civilians in human-protected space." The pirates who had once operated freely under Dominion rule quickly learned that human protection meant something very different. Where the Dominion had ignored piracy as long as tribute was paid, humans hunted pirates with the same ruthless efficiency they had shown against the Empire itself. On Earth, children played in rebuilt cities and attended schools where they learned about the time when humanity had faced extinction and chosen to fight rather than surrender. The war had become legend, and the legend had become a warning to any species that might threaten human civilians. President Hayes addressed the reformed Galactic Council, now meeting for the first time since the war ended. Humanity held a position of unprecedented influence, but they used that power differently than anyone expected. "The universe warned them," he said simply, echoing the words that had become humanity's unofficial motto. "They didn't listen. Let this be the last time such a warning goes unheeded." "We don't seek to rule the galaxy," he continued, his voice carrying to representatives of hundreds of species. We seek to ensure that no species ever again faces the choice between slavery and extinction. We will never allow genocide to go unanswered. We will never stand by while innocents are slaughtered. Ambassador Jake Morrison, now Secretary General of Galactic Affairs, worked tirelessly to build a new framework for interspecies relations. The old system of might makes right had been replaced by something unprecedented, a galactic community, based on protection of the weak rather than exploitation. Every species deserves the right to exist freely, he told the assembled delegates. Every world deserves protection from those who would enslave or destroy them. And every tyrant should remember what happened to the last empire that threatened human civilians. Elder Kithara watched these proceedings with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. She had seen other species rise to galactic prominence, but none quite like humanity. Their power was matched by wisdom, their strength tempered by compassion. You have become what the galaxy needed, she told President Hayes privately after one council session. But remember, young species, with great power comes great responsibility. The universe will be watching to see what humanity does with the strength it has gained. Hayes nodded solemnly. We won't forget the price of this victory, Elder. Every human lost, every colony destroyed, every family broken. That's what we're really protecting when we stand guard over the galaxy. In the depths of space, automated beacons continued to broadcast a simple message to any ship that might pass the sites of the great battles. The message was recorded in every known galactic language. Here the Dominion Empire fell, destroyed for the crime of threatening humanity. Let all who pass this place remember, the universe warned them. They didn't listen. Do not repeat their mistake. The sleeping giant had awakened, transformed from a peaceful species into the galaxy's protector. Humanity had learned that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be so terrifyingly good at war that no one dared to break it. Trade flourished under human protection. Former slave species rebuilt their civilizations. Pirates and tyrants found themselves hunted by forces they couldn't match or escape. The galaxy had peace, but it was a peace enforced by the promise of swift and overwhelming retaliation against anyone who threatened innocent life. Children on 1,000 worlds grew up in safety, protected by the knowledge that somewhere among the stars humanity stood watch. And in the collective memory of every species, the lesson was clear. Never again would the universe need to warn anyone about provoking humanity. They had learned to listen.